All right. I will call to order this Downtown Development Authority meeting on Wednesday, March 10th, 2021 at 8 a.m. Amanda, would you like to take roll call?
Yes, absolutely. And just a reminder, our little exercise this morning for board members, if you are present, you need to state that you are participating in this meeting virtually, remotely, and what city and or county and state that you're participating from. Mr. Avila?
Luis Avila, participating from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Mayor Bliss?
Rosalyn Bliss, participating virtually from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Ms. Dunn?
KM Dunn, participating remotely, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Mr. Eddy? Mr. McNeely?
Greg McNeely, participating virtually from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Ms. Shadke?
Good morning, Jen Shadke, participating remotely from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great. Ms. Seeger? Mr. Talon? And Mr. Nguyen?
Rick Nguyen, participating remotely from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Great.
Okay, good. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the meeting minutes from February 10th. Are there any comments or corrections?
This is KM Dunn, move approval.
McNeely seconds.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comments or corrections? I'll remind everyone that I will ask for any nay votes on any of the motions today. So is there anyone that would like to vote no on this motion? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next is the February 28th, 2021 financials. Tricia is on the call, I believe.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone. Before you have your financial statements as of February 2021. If you take a look actually at statement B, we had some good news. You should see a new budgeted line item for just under $300,000. The city was awarded $1.4 million through the coronavirus relief local government grant from the state, and DDA's portion of that was $297,285. So your budget, both estimated revenues and appropriations to spend, was increased by that amount. And we should see that actual cash coming in March. If anybody has any questions on the statements, I'm happy to take them now, or can do some research and get back to you. If not, would need a motion to accept statement D as your warrant.
Any questions for Tricia? I will accept a motion to accept statement D.
This is KM Dunn.
So moved.
So moved. Or second.
Okay, we'll take the motion from Greg and the second from KM. Any other comments or questions on the financial statements? Would anyone like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none. Statements are accepted. Thank you. Thanks, Tricia.
Thank you.
Next is Andy Guy, going to help us with the Grand River governance recommendations. Andy?
Hey, good morning. My name is Andy Guy. I'm coming from downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. Good to be with you all. As you all know, for the past year and a half or so, DDRI has been convening with the DDA's support a process and a variety of conversations to explore a recommended governance strategy for implementing the community's vision to revitalize the Grand River. As you all know, we have a number of plans and big ideas for transforming the corridor from a gray and industrial isolated channel into an active and vibrant greenway. We just saw some exciting new ideas presented a couple of weeks ago. I think the question we were really asked to wrestle with was how do we execute that vision, particularly as it relates to the public assets that we envision through the corridor, and how do we organize and build up our collaborative capacity to translate that vision into reality. You guys might remember that we had governance guru Kathy Blaha at a board meeting a few months ago, and she overviewed that exploratory process. She shared some of the best practices that we've been learning from similar groups across the nation, and she also presented some of the preliminary findings and the emerging recommendations at that time. Since that time, we also shared those findings out a little bit more broadly with the community, some of the adjacent neighborhoods and other peer organizations with an interest in the river and activities on it or around it. You know, governance isn't always the most exciting discussion to have with folks, a little bureaucratic, but it's important for our river efforts, and we certainly want to thank those folks for prioritizing the time. Really lays some foundation for some partnership moving forward. And our goal today is really to just bring those recommendations back more formally and ask for the board's endorsement of the direction we're heading, and also some additional funds to take some incremental steps forward to continue the organizing work over the next 6 to 12 months or so. And we're also seeking some similar endorsements from key partners. I should mention that the Downtown Grand Rapids Inc. Board of Advisors did endorse the recommendation a week or two ago. So this is the second group that we're coming to in a formal capacity. So what's the recommendation? Generally, the recommendation is a two-pronged approach on the governance model. One is to establish a new nonprofit entity that's really capable of serving as that backbone agency or quarterback that's really focused on cultivating collaboration and coordination to implement the vision for a revitalized corridor. In the near term, that nonprofit would really support organizing efforts around identifying partnership opportunities, doing some capital planning, and ensuring we have some strong plans, particularly as it relates to connections to adjacent neighborhoods and more regionally to really orient around the revitalization effort. On a parallel track, again, a two-pronged approach on this governance model, the recommendation also is to establish a recreational authority under state law that would serve as the platform for regional coordination, public-private community partnership, and importantly, give us more flexibility to access additional funding sources, both in the near term with some immediate capital opportunities that we have, but also potentially over the long term, although we've got a lot of work to do with some of those longer term funding sources. The authority would also help to strike a bit of a balance between independent governance and public accountability as it relates to leadership and engagement, funding, management of any public facilities if it ever undertakes those efforts. And that's something that I think you all are probably quite familiar with through your participation on the DDA and maybe some other authorities that we have around town as well. So the recommendation is that this two-pronged approach remains flexible, especially in the near term as we organize around some real projects and work. We fully anticipate we have a lot more to learn around the project needs and identifying roles and responsibilities moving forward. And so we want to keep that flexibility and allow that model to evolve with the needs of the project over time. But ultimately, the goal is to develop the partnerships, the proficiency, and the capacity to really coordinate the long-term leadership needs of the project. And what I mean is really these are the next steps towards a model that is starting to build its capacity to develop, manage, program, and maintain the public capital assets associated with the revitalized corridor. And I want to emphasize the public assets. We had a lot of conversation about what does this model govern, right? Because there's a lot of interest through the corridor, a lot of different property owners, different decision makers. This is really focused on a leadership structure that's focused on the public assets through the corridor. So the parks that we envision, the trails. I like the term that we hear emerging now, the green ribbon. How are those things developed, managed, programmed, maintained moving forward? So with your endorsement today, if after some discussion here, we agree to go that way, we'll get started on incorporating the new nonprofit entity. We'll start recruiting some board leadership. A number of folks from the committee have agreed to continue forward, and we'll start the work developing the business plan for that nonprofit entity, which really starts to lay out the scope of work over the next couple of years. We'll also get started on some of the outward-facing work. We've heard a lot about continuing to deepen community engagement in the process, and I think we'll look to bring on, in some capacity, some support to help us ramp up those efforts as well. So again, I just got a couple of closing comments. You know, I want to emphasize that these recommendations really build on some substantial community conversation today. You all are familiar that we've done a lot of planning around the quarter. We've also had a lot of conversation around governance, and really through conversations that the county has organized, conversations that the city. We've invested a tremendous amount of time and effort exploring governance options for the river and the parks and other recreational services. And what we're proposing here today really builds on a lot of that good work and aims to lay the foundation for some action and moving forward on that, specifically around the river corridor revitalization efforts. And then I also just want to acknowledge a sense of urgency. I think we've all felt a sense of urgency when it comes to getting positioned for implementation of the projects along the river corridor. I think we've had a lot of conversations, and I think we're all hungry for some action. We certainly feel that sense of urgency, perhaps more now than ever, as we see our partners at Grand Rapids Whitewater getting into a formal permitting process. We're starting to see a potential construction schedule for in-channel stuff, which informs stuff we can do on the edges. And then we're also anticipating, potential support at the federal level for infrastructure funding as we think about economic recovery and things like that. So I think we do feel a real sense of urgency to get positioned to take advantage of these opportunities and really to start building stuff in the next few years. But I just also wanted to emphasize that while we've felt that sense of urgency, we've also taken the time to have a really thoughtful conversation, a very inclusive conversation about how we get ourselves organized to do that. We've really, I think, taken the time to start an inclusive process about how we build this public-private community partnership to support implementation. So I think we can have good confidence in these recommendations coming forward. So I'll stop there, maybe just to quickly emphasize that the action that we're asking today is to endorse the recommended governance model and then authorize us staff to initiate some of the preliminary work with a request of $42,400, primarily to continue to retain the services of Kathy Blaha to get started on some of that nonprofit organizational work.
All right, good. Before we get into discussion, Amanda, I think we have a few more board members that joined us. Do you want to acknowledge them?
We do. Ms. Seeger, if you could just state that you're participating remotely and where from.
Diana Seeger, I'm here working remotely, but in the city of Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, thank you. And Mr. Talon?
Jim Talon, participating remotely from the city of Grand Rapids.
Great. And then Mr. Eddie, were you able to join us as well?
Yeah, yep, I'm here now. Jermel Eddie, participating from the city of Grand Rapids.
Great, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions or comments regarding the governance recommendations? This is definitely a long journey. So there is a sense of urgency, but it is important to we've taken the proper steps to make this right. So, Diana, do you have, I see your hand up.
I do. I'm sorry. I should do the
No, that's okay.
doesn't matter. So I really, I know how long this process has taken, and Andy has been, I mean, it's taken years to get to this point. My question is, though, is that the coordination with now the conceptual plans that the Grand Action Group has, and how this plays, how the governance model will play will integrate or coordinate with those plans, or if they will coordinate with what you've got, with the governance piece that you have developed.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation, and I think we're having some pretty good conversations there. Obviously, Grand Action has had a good parallel process. I think, at least in these early stages, some of the leadership there sees some advantages in some of the tools we're looking to put into the toolbox here. I would also say, Diana, that we did have some leadership sharing through the governance process. So a member, at least one member of the exploratory committee here is also serving on the Grand Action Committee as well. So we've got those connections and we'll build on them.
Thank you, Andy.
Maybe one just thing to add on that, Diana, I did serve on that Grand Action Committee that helped develop that plan with Populous, and I think if anything, this recommendation complements their vision, particularly with the amount of public space and river activation and edge work that they have in mind. So I think there's a lot of complementary factors going on.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I believe,
Mr. Chair, this is
yeah.
Hi, Greg. Yes.
First, I want to say thank you to Andy, because I know he has spent a lot of hours and personal shoe leather on this project, moving it forward. And I think the way it's moved forward is in the right fashion, or as a model. And I realize an issue that I wanted to bring up is probably works against the timeline. So let me frame it that I would encourage us to think about governance in terms of what's ideal and what's possible. And if there's an interstitial step here that is directly mirrored in what's proposed, that's one thing. But long term, my concern is the proliferation of entities throughout the city, but in the downtown space, and that you've got multiple swim lanes that over time begin to have unclear lanes and work against the efficiency of public and private dollars. And just to keep an eye on that, and wondering long term if this is an issue, if the river becomes a rallying point for some increased efficiencies of organizations, whether it would be a merger of the county and city park department, or something along those lines, where we could leverage collaboration and some innovation in structure where we've not seen innovation, but rather proliferation. So again, hopefully not too obtuse in making the point, but this is one of those key pivot points where I think we should think about how to do better and best. And I just have that gnawing concern about proliferation of entities.
Andy, what say you?
Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation, or the comment and the thinking there, and I think it's shared by a number of the members that around the committee, particularly that presented this recommendation, and groups that we've talked to. The example that I often use is that this river organization doesn't need to go do a river cleanup, because there are community assets, there are groups that do that stuff, right? So how are we organizing with them, leveraging that existing capacity? And that's one small minor example. But there is a lot of different activity in the river corridor, different partners, different decision makers, different property owners. And this is really envisioned to, be that common wheel that brings those folks together to open up those lines of conversation, communication, and build the collaboration. And I think what we've seen, Greg, is that the river has become a bit of a unifying force in those conversations. And we're kind of at a starting point to have new and different conversations moving forward. So as this stuff evolves, I think there's tremendous opportunity to continue talking about what that collaboration efficiency looks like moving forward.
So Andy, you also should comment that this organization is necessary because it will have the ability, not the nonprofit, but the river or the regional. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out the name.
The rec authority.
Yeah, authority, that it has the ability to raise funding, whether it's from state, feds, wherever, where our other organizations don't have that ability. So I share the comment or the concern of, we do have a lot of groups, and at sometimes we're working towards the same goal, but at different paces, and maybe this will bring us together in some fashion, hopefully.
Chair Wynn, can I follow?
Sorry, I'm sorry, Mayor. Go right ahead.
That's okay. That's okay. So I appreciate that question, Greg, because I was wondering a little bit of the same thing related to how do we envision the nonprofit and the authority working with or not working with the City Parks Department, County Parks Department. I do think identifying how that organization not just functions, but what they're responsible for. I think that's where there could be quite a bit of confusion and potential duplication. I know we've run into that already sometimes with parks downtown versus out in the neighborhoods, and who's paying for what and who's taking care of what. And so I for me at least, I know that there's been conversations had. I know that our city manager served on this committee, but I'm just curious, Andy, if you could maybe elaborate on how you envision that to be. If there was a rec authority, which technically would have governance over the entire corridor, would that mean that there wouldn't be a significant responsibility from like the City Parks Department or the County Parks Department?
If that's possible. I think we've got to get this structure established. Give folks confidence that it is competent to do its work. But that's entirely possible. And I think one thing that we've been sort of emphasizing is let's pick a project and get started on it and use that project to really advance the conversation around those roles and responsibilities. And maybe it's Ed 201 and on the edge there, or maybe it's the Leonard to Ann trail connection, or maybe it's a different opportunity site in the corridor. But having some of those project-based conversations to figure that stuff out and allow this to evolve over time, I think is sort of the posture that we have, and why I emphasize flexibility in this. It's entirely possible that the nonprofit organization plays a short-term leadership role just to get us organized around some basic planning, prioritization, capital planning, and things like that, and then takes a back seat to something like an authority that plays a larger role. It's really thinking about how we organize those that leadership and those partnerships moving forward.
Yeah, that's helpful. I just remember the presentation by the Detroit Riverfront, and I remember talking to the presenter afterwards, and him sharing, one of the benefits was that they were able to be very nimble and be able to pivot quickly because of their independence, and they weren't reliant on, having to go through the bureaucratic structures to get things done. And I think that, when we looked at all of the different models and talked to different groups throughout the country, I think that was one of the things that resonated with many of us.
Just give you all a sense of the amount of activity in the corridor right now. We did a summary. I can share this out, and some of you might remember it we did it in the fourth quarter last year. We tried to summarize all the activities that are happening in the corridor from Riverside to Millennium Park. And that summary was 6 pages long with more than 30 major initiatives. And we just updated it and I think added another page and 10 more things. And that's counting Grand Rapids Whitewater as one project, which is essentially a dozen projects underneath its umbrella. So all that to say, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to get our arms around. In some places, like think of Line Square, DGRI's in the lead with the city and the CAA and other partners there. Across the river at the museum and the renovation plans they have, the Grand Rapids Public Museum is in the lead and other people are in a different position. So there's 2+ dozen opportunity sites through the corridor, and each one is going to be a unique opportunity in case, because there's different interests and stakeholders as we go. So I think we really need to preserve that flexibility moving forward on a case-by-case basis. But to get to the core of your question, there is a ton of opportunity here for increased partnership, role sharing, and collaboration with the city parks department, other departments that are focused on the river, the county, and frankly, the DDA and some of DGRI's operations as well. So this gives us the space to have those conversations more deliberately and intentionally.
Any other comments, questions? I feel like this is a milestone, a launching pad, something like that. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion, Chair.
Thanks, Mary.
I'll second it. This is Diana.
Okay, Diana, thank you. Again, any other comments or questions? Is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everybody.
Next is, I believe, the 120 Ionia liquor license request.
We actually have a trash can item first.
Oh, I skipped number 5. I'm sorry. That was not intentional. I like trash cans.
Melvin won't take it personally.
Yeah, I'll try not
He's on the
to.
call.
I'm a little offended, but it's okay. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm here to talk trash as usual. So just a quick history. If you recall, in 2019, DGRI completed work on the streetscape guidelines that documented a document that kind of reimagined all of the infrastructure in downtown and brought it in line with a singular vision. And in 2020, we started work on implementation of that, of those guidelines, specifically in the Granville corridor. Since then, we have added trash cans and new infrastructure on the west side, as well as up and down the Ionia corridor. So things like new trash cans and new benches, and just here to continue that work. Right now I'm looking at replacing 36 cans throughout Center City and part of the Hartside area. And implementation of these 36 cans will bring about 90% of our trash can infrastructure up to the current street space guidelines, leaving about 10% or so that still need to be replaced and brought in line with the existing street space guidelines. That's not to count things like benches and other infrastructure that also need to be kind of brought up to speed, but that's where we are with the trash infrastructure. So I'll keep this short and sweet, and basically I'm here to ask for authorization of funding in the amount of $84,580 to replace the 36 trash cans throughout Center City and Hartside. And here are some slides to kind of show you where they'll be going. So some down by the downtown market, a lot around sort of the westernmost east side of the river, and then looking at a couple of corridors, Commerce, Fulton Street, some replacements up around the Children's Museum and in Monument Park. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Melvin? Any other trash talk?
I'll also accept adoration of how beautiful the trash cans are. That's fine too.
They are nice. They are nice.
Well, I'll take the motion and I'll say how much I love trash cans. It's good to see you.
This is Cam. I'll support the motion.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from the motion? Hearing none, Motion carries. Thank you, Melvin.
Thank you, everybody.
Now we have a liquor. Now we can talk liquor.
No, first trash, then liquor.
Yes.
Thanks, Melvin. I'll do a quick introduction on this, Mr. Chair. So we had a request from the Rutledge located down at 120 Ionia Avenue for a Class C development area liquor license. I think you're all pretty familiar with this process. So it's a straightforward request, meets all of the criteria required for approval. We do have Lauren and Susan Hansen here from the Rutledge, and wanted to give them just a minute to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the Rutledge if you haven't been in there. I know a few of our staff went down probably a little over a year ago to walk through it, and this space is beautiful. And so I think we're happy to see this move forward, and just wanted to give them an opportunity to say hi. So Lauren and Susan, if you are on, could you turn your mic and video on and say hi to the board?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'm Lauren. This is my wife, Susan Hansen. We own and manage the Rutledge. As Tim said, we're right here on Ionia, across from Studio Park. Yeah, and it's an event space for weddings, receptions, corporate events. And we're sitting in it right now. We can seat ultimately up to 275 people. And, you know, post-COVID, I mean, we're capacitized to 275, and we're excited for better days ahead. I say that because we joke that we literally picked the worst time in the history of mankind to begin an event business, but you know, we'll get this behind us, and you know, things will be great in the future. So we mainly wanted to join today so you could put a face with the name. We feel the packet in your board packet, the information in your board packet fairly accurately summarizes our request, but we wanted to be available if you guys had any questions.
Any questions? Those of us that are in the events and meetings business feel your pain. So,
Thank you.
Yes, misery does love company, I guess. But there are better days ahead for sure. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move support.
I'm sorry, is that Greg?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll second.
All right. Is there any other comments or questions? Is there anyone on the board that would like to vote no or abstain from this motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Good luck, Lauren and Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you for moving forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Next is my favorite subject, Lion Square. Just as, just as so everyone is reminded, Tim, I think we've been working on this for how long?
Well, I think we have been working on it in the latest iteration for the past 5 years. But if anyone remembers, there's a history dating back well before that. So I think we're still within the second decade of work on this, and hopefully that's where it ends.
I think so. It does date some of us, but why don't we go ahead and is Mark on the phone? Is he going to give the presentation?
Mark is on. I also believe we have representatives from our progressive team here. But Mark, do you want to tee it up?
Yeah. Good morning. Yeah, so I think we've got at least a couple folks from Progressive here today. It looks like Nolan and Ryan are both in the meeting. So we have, like Rick said, we've been working on obviously the project as a whole for quite a long time, but this one in particular has been moving really well. It's actually, we feel like it's been fast-tracked a bit with the goal of starting construction in late April. And I think we're still on task for that. The steering committee has met regularly, usually once a week, to take a look at the design as it's developed. And we are now at really what we would think of as the end of design development, the beginning, or they're really partway through the construction documentation of it. And we're also fortunate enough to have Rockford Construction with us so that the budgeting and the pricing can be run parallel with the design, so that we know where we stand with the budget and there aren't really any surprises when we actually do the final bid of it in the coming weeks. So with all of that, I think I'll turn it over to either Ryan or Nolan. I'm not sure which one of them is starting.
Hey, Mark.
Leave it to them. Yeah.
I'll be kicking us off.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see you. Sorry, Marcia.
No, it's okay. Hi, my name is Mashery Valentine, and I'm an architect with Progressive AE. And my design team members, Nolan Miller and Ryan Johnson, are on the call today, and we're very glad and grateful to be a part of this time to share about this project. The design principles for this, with our process at Progressive AE, we want to make sure that this project is successful from the very get-go. We want to make sure that we establish how we want to move forward so that it is something that for time to come, people always appreciate and enjoy the space. So we came up with 3 design principles. The first one is to create a flexible 4-season space that brings people together and connects them to their context. This is super important for Grand Rapids because we want to establish a memorable destination that promotes a culture of engagement and inclusion. And finally, create a comfortable shared place for pedestrians and vehicles in an equitable environment. So all of these things you can see here are queuing us up for this really intense and powerful movement through the space, that when people come to Grand Rapids, they understand what they see as a place for them to be a part of the experience. So you can see here on this next slide, we did some 3D renderings of how we envision experiencing the Grand. This term we've coined here is thinking about Grand Rapids, and you can see in this street development that you can experience the Grand Rapids. You can experience the actual rapid. You can experience the elements of success in our history and all the things about Grand Rapids that we love to celebrate. So it's, as you look at this overhead structure, you'll see that in the next picture, it has like this flowing and ebbing movement. It's about the rapid. It's thinking about taking the Grand and making it into the topography of making it back to what it originally was. So when we think about, in this next picture, you'll see how you get this immersive setting that people want to feel like they're exploring. And for those imagining that they can't get into the water, this is a way for them to experience it for themselves. So it's exciting in these next couple of views that we want to make sure that from above and below, people in the Amway Hotel to those who are passing on Monroe, they feel like they are drawn into the space. And you can see in some of the next pictures too that we want to make sure that people feel comfortable walking along the site. You can see we've looked at ways to make it feel warm and inviting. And when we talk to the development team, the stakeholders, some of the things that we talked about is light and shadow. How can we incorporate natural elements like water, natural plant material, warm elements that make people feel like this is a place for them to be, yet it still allows cars to use it as a street. So it's really interesting when you see in this next photo here that we've started to take some of the faces of the building that are not warm and inviting, and we're starting to use them as reflective surfaces so that people can see themselves in the environment, and it will draw more natural light into the experience. So as we continue to proceed down the street, you can see how over time and throughout the day, people get a different experience. So just imagine yourself driving down Lion Square, down this quote unquote river, and you are heralded into this space where you can say, I want to experience the Grand, experiencing the Grand Rapids. So I want Nolan to go ahead and take it over and talk to us more about the overlook for us.
Yeah, thanks, Mashery. One common element that you see throughout these images is the absence of a traditional raised curb. And so what we're introducing here is a flush element to create a common ground plane across the whole site. So it feels like it's more unified and uniform across the ground plane. And we're using pavers and concrete banding to warm up the space and be more inclusive and accessible. So it creates this space that is more flexible and can be programmed for a myriad of events. At the overlook here at the river, we've introduced a separate material that crosses through where the river trail comes across north and south. You can see the river trail delineated with the banding on the sides there. It's a 14-foot wide banding that still encourages movement across the north-south along the river. But this overlook creates a real moment at the river that encourages lingering and can accommodate different types of events. This could be some sort of cocktail event, or it could be weddings, could be something for art prize. In addition to that, we've also introduced a structural element that's pays a little homage to the history and industry of Grand Rapids. So we're looking at something that kind of mimics some of our bridges and can incorporate some really neat lighting elements and some branding strategies here. And then the flexibility of providing like an overhead canopy and shade structure for different times of the year, and creates this kind of like sheltered experience. So here it is without it. Just to the east of that, closer to the entrance of the exhibitors building, we've created an area called the Garden that encourages those to meander through it and kind of sit and linger and reflect in these areas. It's bermed, so it has an opportunity to buffer some of the noise and from the adjacent vehicular traffic. But it also is going to have quite a bit of vegetation in here and create this really neat canopy and kind of this magical experience in here. So we've placed a couple of large, deep benches, twice as large as what you would typically see. So it kind of encourages this playful element for all ages. And here it is at night. And we've also proposing a fireplace at the terminus of this, of where the garden comes in and approaches the overlook. Again, to go back to one of the design principles, we want to create a 4 seasons space. So as we know, many months out of the year are quite chilly around here. So and having something that warms up the space is really important to this project. So here's a view back to the fireplace. And what we've done here with the overlook, as you would know today, this is basically where the amphitheater sits. And the amphitheater is depressed quite a bit and is a challenge to traverse. If you are going north-south, you have to kind of go around it. And it's just a space that is underutilized. So what we're achieving here is bringing it back up to meet all the adjacent grades and creating a space that's just accessible to all. So here's the view from the river, and you can see how it projects over the flood wall a little bit. It kind of embraces the river's edge. What we've done here is actually eliminated the physical access points from what would be the amphitheater. Now there are stairs that come down to the boardwalk at the river's edge. We've eliminated that and encouraged access to the north and south of here. And here's some lighting elements that we're looking at throughout the site. We had an update with the city yesterday that is pushing back on this idea of a new lighting element and wanting to do more of the traditional acorn that they have there now. One of the reasons why we would rather do something like this style is because of the future plans for the catenary lighting at the beginning that Masherie presented on. Those lights would perform better if we shielded the lighting down, as you can see with these elements now, as opposed to the acorns that are used throughout the city today. So that's still some dialogue that we're having with the city right now. But these types of contemporary lights would be sprinkled along the Lion Street and then towards on the promenade south along Wolfgang's and Amway. And then lastly, we have an opportunity to do some really neat lighting effects on the overlook and the garden itself. We're looking at providing a fixture on top of the exhibitors building shining down to create a really neat moonlighting effect. Since it will be a challenge to get really mature large trees in there to provide moonlighting within the tree, we're gonna focus it on the top of the building coming down, so you really get this neat shadowing in the ground plane, and then have a neat experience in there that I think will be really unique to Grand Rapids. So you can see what that kind of element achieves here in these photos. You can really focus, like in the top two images, you can really focus what that looks like on the ground plane, or you can have it kind of spill out in the, like you see in the lower images, that creates this really neat ambient lighting. And we also have a drinking fountain that we're introducing here along the river trail that will be a neat filling station for dogs, runners, cyclists, and those in wheelchairs. So we think this is a neat place for that to occur, kind of where everything converges. I think that's it. Any questions?
Any questions for either Mashari or Nolan?
Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
So first, thank you. This is great to see this update and the vision for this space. You made a comment about the lighting and that you're working with the city. Can you elaborate? Is there some kind of issue or concern related to the lighting? I personally think the lighting looks like it will be a great addition to the space.
Yeah. So yeah, yesterday our lighting designer and electrical engineer met with the city to discuss this new lighting element, because it is unique to not only the site but Grand Rapids. And from a maintenance standpoint, there is a concern of, if something happens to it, do we have, how do we replace it? We don't have, do we have additional stock items? That's the extent of what I know about it right now. But I know that we are approaching it from like its performance, how it performs and how it would perform with the other lighting that is desirable on site, specifically the catenary lighting. And we had concerns for the catenary lighting overhead, with it being a conflict with the acorn lighting that's traditional to Grand Rapids. So we feel like if we are to introduce a new lighting element there, it should be consistent throughout the rest of the site.
Yeah, one of the things that we actually explored with the design for the lighting is a harmony between what was proposed in the River for All proposal and what is in the city today. And so when you look at the overall design of the fixture that we selected, we looked for something that harkened back to the shape of an acorn, and yet still had the performance value that made sure that we weren't having light spill off. I think most of us understand that we don't want to have light pollution. So this will greatly help in an environmental way, and for the rest of the area. We're basically bringing it closer to what we would want for Grand Rapids.
Thank you. I would assume that if it's really just a maintenance issue and replacement, if there's a concern, that's got to be a problem that's easily solved, would be my guess. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I would agree as well, Meryl. Just to maybe give you some additional info. So we're, as the design has been developing, we're also in conversations around the MOU and how the maintenance and management of this space will play out, sort of related to what we just talked about with governance. So all of those elements related to maintenance, replacement of fixtures, lights, all those things will be incorporated into that. And so I do think this is an easily solvable problem that we can just address in the MOU.
Great. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Talon, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the presentation and the information as well. This is not a criticism, but just a curiosity. Earlier major iteration had a lot of river access from this site, and this clearly only has a river view. And I'm wondering what the thinking was to move in that other direction and move away from the direct river access. Can someone talk about that a little bit?
Maybe I can jump in on that. I think what we've learned over the years on this project is that it's a complex space to begin with. And as soon as you introduce anything that goes into the floodplain or the river, it gets infinitely more complicated. So I think we still believe that those elements of access and improvement are important. I think, as you know, we've funded some work on the lower Riverwalk infrastructure that we hope can get improved. But as it pertains to the phase 1 of this project, we felt that keeping it out of the floodplain would help us to actually get it implemented. And so that was really the thinking going in. But I will point out those elements that you just cited, we still believe are important, and we would want to address those at a later phase.
Here, and then the other one inside.
Member Eddie, you are not on mute.
Just to add to that, Tim, or I believe that access to the river can be added at a later date, should we desire to do that. So, yeah, part of Tim is so right. It's a complicated space. So, yeah, we wanted to be able to accomplish this first, and then maybe move on once the river restoration is in full gear and we know what Whitewater is planning, etc. So
that's helpful. Thank you.
Member Eddie, you do have your hand up. Do you have a comment or a question?
Yes, and sorry for the earlier shenanigans there. Got some construction stuff at my house here. Essentially, I just wanted to, I saw the water fountain, which is great, but just thinking this may not be a discussion for this group, but maybe it's another one. But just, I would love to see one of the bike repair stations somewhere along the design, because I think those have been very helpful as they've been spread out across the city. So that was my comment.
I thought you wanted to put a juice bar there or something.
Well, I want to move slowly, so okay. I just feel if the bike repair station is, maybe I'll bring the juice bike.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Rick, I failed to mention one of the big elements is that this entire space will be snow melted. It's kind of important. Everything that is not green will be snow melted on this site.
Right. I think the idea too, from at least our side and in discussions with ASM, is to create some additional, hopefully, some additional food and beverage outlets within this space, so that it can really be whether it's food trucks or whatever we come up with, but to really help activate the space on a year-round basis. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rick. One of the things that we did, and if you can go to the overall plan, Nolan, one of the things that we did is we wanted to make sure that that central space in the middle could be an activation zone where people could gather and meet and have events and venues, and that first entry area off of Monroe would be a welcoming area that draws you and funnels you to that space. And then that last area at the end near the river is like the celebrated moment where people can converge and dwell on the site. So we see a lot of opportunity for different types of people to engage the space in numerous ways.
Thanks for that, Mashri. One other thing to point out as we're kind of looking at the next item of World of Winter, we are also looking at opportunities to have a more permanent installation of the projection mapping that's going on down there. This, again, that wouldn't be part of this phase of the project, but we've seen some great success in activating the space with that current installation, and so we are looking at a way to make that permanent because it has been so successful. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. If there are no other comments, we'll just thank Marjorie and Nolan for the presentation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next, I think Mr. Kelly, you're up, right?
We have one more item, World of
Kim.
Winter. Yeah,
You're-
Kim is going to do an overview of World of Winter.
Sorry, my other computer.
Well, that's all right. No problem. It seems like this is the morning for technical difficulties. So
I know, right? So, okay, Kim, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent.
Amanda, can you go start from the beginning? And I can take control.
everyone look away.
I know.
Okay, well, while Amanda's working on this and I can take control here, basically we're still in the thick of it. We've got most of the majority of World of Winter is now over, but we do still have one installation out, the projection mapping show, which is this Saturday and Sunday, and this is the final show. So, but we're still working on it. Just as a quick recap of World of Winter, normally we focus heavily on larger events, and with the current state of the world, we had to really reevaluate and kind of change things up and focus more heavily on placemaking installations specifically. So with that, we kind of rearranged everything. And can everyone see the presentation okay?
It just shows World of Winter right now.
Okay. For some reason, the presentation won't let me scroll. Amanda, do you know what's going on? It won't let me change slides.
I can advance for you. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Why.
Next slide.
Are you seeing the advancement or no?
No. Maybe stop presenting and restart.
Okay.
There it goes.
There we go.
Can you see now? Okay.
Yeah. I can try taking control and see if that works. Yeah, well, it still won't let me do it.
It won't. Okay.
So
I'll take control.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. So this is a quick overview. Overall, we had 52 events. We had 20 different art installations. 75 artists participate in World of Winter. We had 2 international exhibits, 1 national, and 72 local installations. 60 of whom were of a minority. We had 109 ice sculptures. That's 200 plus blocks of ice, 50,000 pounds of ice. We were able to award 16 grants, 11 of whom were a minority. 20 separate organizations that teamed up with us to help us execute in 60 days of activation. Overall, this made us the largest ice festival in the U.S. this year, which is a big deal. Next slide. Installations that DJI curated specifically. I think you guys are pretty familiar with the Hibby Kozos by Hibby Kozo. We were also able to team up with the Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians and artist Alan Campo here locally to design the custom Manadu Bawating installation that encompasses imagery that's extremely important and symbolism from the Native community here locally. So we're working with the Parks Department on where this is going to be installed in the future, likely 6th Street or Canal Park, and we'll be able to do a ribbon cutting with that in the future. Next slide. We were also able to bring in Impulse from Krios. This is out of Canada, which was 15 interactive teeter-totters that play music when you interact with them. Next slide. Winter Tumbleweeds and Grasses by the department. This is a local group here that was able to create these repurposed pool noodle installations on the Blue Bridge. Next slide. The Singing Tree by Limbic Media. This is another international installation, and we were able to bring in an ice piano performances and other performances underneath the tree to be able to kind of interact with it directly. And this was over in Canal Park. Next slide. The Lamplighter by Tyler and Ashley Voorhees. This was an interesting scenario where we started installing all of our artwork downtown, and this local artist, this couple reached out to us and loved what was going on, and they just wanted to get their artwork out there. So we figured out a way to incorporate them into the festival, and this was an interactive installation that you get on the bikes and you pedal, and it lights up the lamplighter and the lights. So we were able to bring this downtown for a week over at 555. Next slide. Next, we have our Seasonal Wonders projection show, and this was in collaboration with LiveSpace, Amway, DeVos Place, and of course the city. But this is the one installation that's currently still going on, which was a really big hit. It covered the seasons of Michigan, as well as some local history, and there was a custom score that was created specifically for the installation, and it's been a really fun project. We've always wanted to do this, and it really showcases Lion Square as a destination spot, which normally it's not. So this has been an exciting project. Next slide. We teamed up with the Ice Brigade to bring in these 10 ice luminaries, which was a really big hit, specifically the first couple days while they were down there on Gillette Bridge. Next slide. We had 84 sculptures for Valentine's this year. This was a really busy weekend. We had 12 days of activation, so they were able to stay up a pretty long time because it was so cold. So if you recall, this was something the DDA did approve to purchase ice sculptures for businesses this year, which the businesses really, really appreciated it. And it was a really successful weekend. I poked my head into about 5 different businesses. There was a minimum of 45 waits at each location that I popped my head in there, and 2 of which were on a 2-day wait. So it was a really busy weekend downtown. Next slide. Events and programming. This is stuff our team curated specifically. So we had the Icebreaker, which is our normal 5,000-pound ice sculpture that we do at Rosa Parks Circle. So we had over 800 votes for what they wanted, which was a train this year. And this lady on the right-hand side, she comes down every year, and she always does her own ice installations at home. So she freezes a bunch of ice luminaries and passes them out downtown. So she's a pop-up curator herself. So it's always nice to see her out. Next slide. We had ice games all throughout the downtown, like foosball and cornhole, chess, all kinds of games that were made of ice and placed throughout the neighborhood. Next slide. Love on Ice. We had about over 100 people come out and carve their name onto the ice sculpture for Valentine's Day this year. Next slide. The Scavenger Hunt, which was new this year, where we teamed up with the Grand Rapids Sport and Social Club to create a scavenger hunt. We had over 168 active teams that participated. So this was a really fun way to get people to see all of the art installations and also visit area businesses. Next slide. Pop-up performer nights. We have these every Friday for the 2 months, all throughout the downtown in various locations from local musicians and performers. Next slide. The tribal stories, we teamed up with the Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians and Chief and Ogama, Ron Yab, where he told tribal stories and talked about the installations itself, which was really moving. I've known Ron for like a decade, and I've never heard him sing before in my life, and he sang, and it was just like magical down by the river. It was a really wonderful experience, and I know he really enjoyed himself talking about the history of the tribe. So next slide. We also teamed up with Lunar New Year's, or did Lunar New Year's, and teamed up with the Grand Rapids Asian Pacific Islander Festival, and did activation over in Anabawan Park with various performances throughout the downtown as kind of a pop-up performance event series. Next slide. So Dance in the Annex by Hibby Kozo. We did 4 performances with Dance in the Annex at Hibby Kozo, and got quite a good crowd to be able to come out and watch the performance. Each performance was a lot of fun. So next slide. We also teamed up with Michigan Drag Brunch to do Winners of Drag. We did one event on the Blue Bridge and realized that it was just too high traffic area. So we moved the second location over to Calder Plaza, which gave us a lot more space, and it was both of them were really successful and a lot of fun. So hopefully we can team up with them again. They're a great group. We also did a dance performance down at Hibby Kozo with AB and with fire performers and fire pits. Next slide. We teamed up with running and walking tours. We had 7 different ice sculpture tours, 4 miles of murals tours, 6 Black History tours, and 6 Chili Challenge tours that focused on the historical spaces of Grand Rapids. Next slide. So World of Winter installations and events that was curated by our local artists. This was something that we have our seasonal event sponsorship program, and we were not receiving any sort of grant submissions for those sponsorship dollars this year because of COVID. So I was like, okay, we've got this money here. This is something we want to do. Why don't we do a big cast call and outreach to our local community and focus more on placemaking initiatives rather than events? And by doing a cast call and encompassing them into the World of Winter Festival, it was a huge success. So we were able to fund local artists, new unique ideas, and give them a platform to start and do their own projects. And then we would help with all the logistics on city permitting and whatnot involved with the installation itself. So this one here is Beam Me Up Snow Person by Valerie Wahana, which was a window installation that was put in place down in South Division. Next slide. Color the Skyline was by Wicked Pro Events. We had 10 buildings with these wacky waving inflatable tube people, which seems to make everybody crack up every time they see one of these things. They're pretty funny. So those were in various areas of the downtown, one across from the Children's Museum. So the kids that are stuck in the hospital still got to see and participate in a little bit of World of Winter. Next slide. Elevated Love Language was organized by our poet laureate, Kid Kane, and 8 other artists from the spoken word poetry community, where they were able to put up basically love poems throughout the downtown and billboards and marquees. Next slide. Grand Illuminations was by Reb Roberts, where he illuminated the rock island over in between Pearl Street and the Blue Bridge. Next slide. Have a Heart was by Barbara Lash. There was 12 different heart installations where she teamed up with 12 different nonprofits to paint these hearts, and they were on Monroe Center and also over at the Public Museum. Next slide. Love Works was another window installation by Carrie Rolex on South Division, where she hosted an event at Rosa Parks Circle and had people draw and color and cut out the hearts and create custom heart installations, and even delivered some to a couple area hospitals and then collected them and hung them all as an installation. Next slide. Path of Encouragement was by Andrea Zelnick, and this is on the south lawn of the Public Museum. These were 6 different encouragement installations with kind of like pep talks that were placed on them, which these were really, really fun and a big hit as well. Next slide. Sunshine Alley by Lauren Coster and Marissa Fellows. This was over at Studio Park Alley, where they were able to do one large event and then activate the alleyway in that area. Next slide. Project Hope was by Decommissioning Ministries, where they highlighted people that used to be homeless and are now living in stable homes, and basically telling the story of these people that have received the help by Decommissioning Ministries. Next slide. Seasons of Love concert series. This was programmed by Circle Theater, and they hosted 3 different events at 3 different locations within the downtown. Next slide. Slam Jam Tournament was by Zigzag Ultimate, and this was over at 555. This is basically like Can Jam, if any of you guys are familiar with that. Next slide. So overall, media and communications, these are some stats. It was a really good year. Our communications team did an amazing job promoting the festival. I mean, they always do a really wonderful job. But this year, I mean, especially during a pandemic where there was no one coming downtown, it really changed the footprint of downtown, and it was a really busy 2 months, particularly on the weekends. We even got national news coverage with Lester Holt on NBC, which we did not pay for, and that we were seen as one of the cities inspiring America, which was really nice to see. Next slide. These are stats on pedestrian traffic. So overall, based on our ped counters, we had over 400,000 attendees in the 2 months of downtown. Overall, with that, and that's a safe number. Cost per attendee of the DDA investment would be 87 cents per attendee, which is very minimum. And overall, we had some of the biggest record-breaking numbers, even in our downtown specifically, not even focusing on winter, but so it was a big year. And next slide. And that's pretty much it. That's a quick recap. We'll still have additional numbers in the future, but I just want to thank the board for approving us to improving and investing in us to be able to do this year. It was a real fun experience with my team and also many others from the community that put a lot of work into World of Winter to make downtown a fun and inviting place to be downtown. So I just want to say thank you all, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So Kim and Tim, I'm hearkening back to year 1 of World of Winter and the amazing difference this year just in the number of events and participation and drawing crowds during COVID. It's really is quite the feat. Kimberly should be super proud.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've seen elements of these over the years, but nothing to this. We've never pulled it all together in this manner. And yeah, again, Kim, the events team, everyone that's been working on this has just kind of hit it out of the park. And just to underline the traffic, I think what we saw was that comparing to last year and several years ago, this winter was some of the busiest days for foot traffic in downtown, regardless of pandemic or not. And so we've seen the appetite for it, and I think as we're we're going to talk quickly about budget next, but as we're looking into FY22, this is something we're going to look to continue going.
Any other comments or questions?
Way to go, Kim.
Yeah, who did the clapping hands?
I did.
That's pretty good.
I'm so clever, Rick.
How do you even do that?
I don't know.
Well, you just, you have to have no fear of pushing buttons.
That is
we'll take the top. Yeah.
Just close your eyes and hit the button, right?
Yeah.
Chair,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, Mira.
I just want to make a comment, not a question. I just want to say thanks to Kim and really the entire team. I feel like for years we've been talking about how do we truly become a 4-season city and embrace winter, and I think that will be one of the great things that has come out of this past year. And I'm looking forward to how we can not only continue this, but really build on it in the years ahead. So thanks so much.
Thank you. 100%. I think our team's already starting to plan for and ideas for next year, and I really just have to plug my team and community members. We all did this together, and it was a lot of fun. So thank you all.
Hey, Rick.
Very good.
This is
Yes.
Jim.
Yes, Jim.
I wanted to add thanks to and appreciation for, Amazing World of Winter. And I don't gush very often or easily, but that projection mapping thing was just amazing. And I have told so many people about it, and it was really, really cool. And, the more we can, if we can incorporate that into the Lion Square design at some point, that will be really great. I just loved it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Lion Square has dibs on that, so you can't move that around the city. All right.
Well, the building is perfect for it. I think it fits so well, and even how you can, as an audience, kind of gather to watch it. It's really fantastic.
The music was great too, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, the live space and the people that had helped with the custom score and everything was really they did a really great job. Eddie Tadlock and I have dreamed about doing something like this for years now, specifically on that building. So it was kind of a dream come true for our team and my buddy Eddie.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks for your hard work. Next is our next favorite subject, the world of budget.
Yeah, I'll take a couple minutes here. We have a TIFA meeting at 9:45, so we'll try to get you out of here in time so that a couple of members who cross over can get some coffee. No action today on this. I just wanted to take a couple minutes, to set up our budget discussion in April, and just kind of talk through some of the high level things that we're seeing and think about, and then of course happy to entertain any questions or comments. Amanda, I'm not even going to try to share my screen or take control of this thing, so if you could advance for me, that would be excellent. Thank you. So while this is obviously an uncommon year, we're relying on our pre-established process and still doing all of our work with the alliances. As in years past, we begin our budget discussions immediately in the new year. And we'll continue those through this month. So this month, all of the alliances will meet, kind of finalize their budget recommendations, and that is what will be incorporated to what we bring forward to you next month. So again, we appreciate our alliances a great deal. They put a lot of work in and help us to bring forward these recommendations, so that what you're seeing is not just built amongst the staff, but really amongst the community and helping to deliver on our priorities. After you see it next month, we'll of course go to the City Commission. We are tentatively scheduled to be there at the end of April, so April 27th. And that would be when we would get our approval for the fiscal year beginning July 1. Next slide, please. Maybe just to take a quick second, I won't get into detail, too much detail on these, and obviously our budget is forward-looking, but just want to highlight the number of projects that we were able to deliver and the number of priorities that we were able to accomplish this year. Obviously, World of Winter, as Kim just talked about, but projects like the skate park, the Portland Loo and Hartside, which had been under discussion for several years, we were able to get done in fiscal year 21. In addition to projects like the Van Andel Arena Plaza, the new murals, and also, even despite some of the shutdowns and lockdowns, we saw new businesses open. So the Residence Inn there at Fulton and Ionia, which the DDA helped support through development support, opened up just a couple weeks ago. And GR Noir, we were able to help celebrate that ribbon cutting back in February. So despite the shutdowns and I think what was no doubt a difficult year on a lot of fronts, we did see some positive things and momentum and the ability to continue to deliver on community priorities. Next slide, please. And just a reminder, we still have 3+ months of the fiscal year left. And so there is more on the way, just on the development side. In the next 4 to 6 months, we expect to see the opening of some major projects. Those include the Acrisure headquarters, the RDV core office, the Grand Rapids Innovation Partners Phase 2, as well as the DeVos Center up on Michigan Street. So a lot of activity. This amounts to about $400 million of construction activity, a little over 500,000 square feet of office and 50,000 square feet of commercial space. So again, we know and recognize this was a difficult year, but there are still very positive signs for downtown, and we continue to see that this is a place that people want to be. So those are things that we'll continue to build on for the next year. Next slide, please. And just, you know, what I was able to fit on one slide with pictures, some of the things that we're thinking about for next year. So there are significant development projects, as I mentioned, still in the pipeline. The Phase 3 at the Grand Rapids Innovation Partners project there in Michigan and Monroe with the Perigo announcement. The Spectrum development in Monroe North, just south there of 6th Street, is also on the verge of breaking ground and getting ready to go. And those are discussions that we're a part of and helping to deliver that. New public space amenities, so Lion Square, as we talked about earlier, will get improvements, but also Rosa Parks is scheduled to begin construction later this spring or summer. Obviously, as we think about reopening and getting people back downtown to support our businesses and really just, you know, capitalize on moving into the spring and summer, support for events like our prize and a number of events that are starting to be discussed as a way to celebrate and really to sort of energize the downtown landscape again. And those are in addition, I should say, to some of the catalytic projects that we've been working on. We talked briefly about the Market Avenue work that was just presented at Econ Club in February. You know, identifying a role for not only the governance entity, but the DDA to help support both the public space development and long-term maintenance and programming, and then also the real estate development. You know, there may be a role for the DDA to play to help deliver on that vision. And then our West Side work that is wrapping up now that will give us a roadmap for how development could occur on the West Side. So those are some of the big picture things we're thinking about. There is obviously going to be a lot more that will be in the budget that you'll see next month, but just wanted to highlight some of those things. Next slide, please, Amanda. And then just, you know, as we're going into this, of course, we need to balance our opportunities and, you know, the projects that we want to see with some of the other obligations that we have in place. So balancing, you know, our debt service, our development support, any previously authorized contributions. And this year, probably more so than any other, really paying attention to our partner capacity. You know, we do a number of projects with the city and wanting to make sure that, you know, we're just being mindful of some of the budgetary pressures that they're going to have, as well as just the broader economic uncertainty. You know, we expect, and as we're seeing the vaccines roll out, we're optimistic that things will be opening up soon, but we don't know exactly when that will be. We also don't know, you know, what the public's, you know, psychology is going to be and when they're going to be ready to go back to events at Van Andel and come to the convention center. So those are all things that are going to influence and play into our budget as we're thinking about some of the partnerships that we typically use to implement community priorities and the GR Forward goals. The last two slides just on, you know, what we're seeing right now. Obviously, we'll finalize our revenues and what we expect to see going into FY22 before we're with you in April. But just for historical context, looking at our two primary funding streams, one is the local tax increment. Historically, and apologies if this is a little faded, we can send it out after the fact. Over the past 6 years, we've continued to see a steady growth in our local tax increment. This year in particular, we are 14% above what we had budgeted. What you're seeing there, the blue bars are budget, the orange line is the actual. Why the actual is below our budget for all these years is because for every given year, we'll account for a portion of a fund balance. And so what we bring in revenue in the new local tax has continued to grow. Why it's a little short of the actual is because depending on what projects are done, the fund balance transfer may or may not be needed. But we feel confident that our local tax increment will continue to grow and be stable. We're going to project probably a 1 or 1.5% growth. Tricia and I have been talking about that. We think that's reasonable and realistic based on what we've been seeing. And then we'll of course track it as property tax bills go out in the summer. Next slide shows you the non-tax revenue, and this one is obviously a little more volatile. This has quite a bit of fluctuation in it. The big spikes you're seeing there, that's from a land sale that occurred back in FY18. That would have been the areas 4 and 5. Last year, we also saw a spike with the sale of the remnant parcel for the Acrisure development. That is kind of what had buoyed us. Currently, we are showing we're pretty low based on our actuals to budget. I will say, however, that again, there's a fund balance transfer that's accounted for in the FY21 budget there to the tune of about $1.5 million. In addition, as Tricia pointed out, we're going to see a reimbursement of about $300,000 that'll hit next month. Our earnings on investment will be trued up at the end of the year. There are also a couple of payments and loans, as well as a city payment for our Ottawa Avenue acquisition that will come through. So while this is showing some, a very low number at the moment, as we finish out the year, I think the non-tax will show some positivity. We'll probably be ending up a little shy of $1 million, which is still $500,000 less than we budgeted or thought. A lot of that is down to just the lack of event parking revenue that we would get from the west side. But I think overall we're seeing that number will come in enough that we'll be able to kind of carry forward on a lot of our priorities. So those were really just the high level things I wanted to point out and that we're considering, and that we'll be talking a little bit more about in April. And then of course, just wanted to allow any time for questions or discussions as we move into the budget discussion in April.
Member Talon?
Thoughts, anyone?
Thank you, Chair. Tim, thanks. Look forward to seeing the budget. I recently came across a document that was, I think I probably requested it years ago, a summary of the development projects, kind of a summary of where things are at, what the amounts are when they're finished. Is that something you could update for us in the context of the budget? Would love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're referring to the spreadsheet for the development support projects?
Yes.
Is that the one? Yep. Yeah, we'll have that. Be happy to include that in the packet next month.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions regarding the budget? Sounds good. Tim, you want to go through your executive director report?
Yeah, and I got a couple things to highlight here. Obviously, the bulk of what we're doing at the moment, staff-wise, is going to be budget related, but a few things to flag. One, yesterday at City Commission, there was a vote to extend the social zone work through November of 2021, and so prior to that, we're already doing some organizing, but really looking to pivot from some of our winter installations to the pending spring. And so we're working and organizing with the businesses as well as the city to get those deployed and turned around in time for the good weather, which hopefully will stick around. Also wanted to point out that there was an announcement about the Market Avenue sewer line decommissioning. That work is scheduled to begin in April. Are expected to begin in April. That is obviously important because it starts to set up some of the development on 201 Market as well as at the Fulton Market site. So two big initiatives there coming out of the city in the past couple weeks. Also, as we're preparing for spring, we're looking at our planting schedule, and so we have Friends of Grand Rapids Parks will be out starting to plant trees here in April. They're completing an inventory right now of our existing downtown trees. They'll be wrapping that up shortly, and then we'll be starting in on our new plantings. And that will also dovetail with our just overall beautification. Those plantings typically happen right before Memorial Day, but we are coordinating with our McCandy contractors right now to get those set. Last thing on the project front, we put an announcement out earlier in the week, but we do have another Women's Way mural that will be starting shortly. This will be honoring Morelia Ortiz Blakely. who helped, she was a local activist and helped organize the first Mexican Fest in Grand Rapids back in 1970. That 40-foot mural is going to be going in the alley just off of Fulton Street in between Sanchez and Back 40 Saloon. So another important Grand Rapidian to honor, and no doubt what will be another beautiful mural that will add to our growing collection. And then last, just on a staffing note, kind of a bittersweet thing to point out, but did want to just highlight that Chama Katavi, who has been with us for almost 3 years now, did accept another position over with the Fair Food Fund, based out of Ann Arbor, but he's going to be staying in Grand Rapids, thankfully. Chama, as I think many of you know, has been really instrumental in some of our retail innovation grants and really leading the Goal 4 Alliance. And so we thank him for his work. We are sad to see him leave, but we are happy he's staying in Grand Rapids. So just wanted to give a shout out to Chama and thank him for all of his good work. I think that was the extent of my report, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments?
I have a comment. This is KM. I want to thank whoever is responsible for assembling all the data and charts that have been included with our packet. I think it's a really helpful way to see what's going on by the numbers and for Grand Rapids downtown. So appreciate that.
Thank you, and I will highlight Marion Bonneau on our team, who is in charge of all things data related. She's been doing a great job on those reports. So yeah, thank you for that.
Excellent. Hearing no other questions or comments, we now move into public comment. If there's anyone in the public that would like to make a comment, now is your chance and time to do so. Amanda, if you could help me see if anyone raises their hand or...
No hands are currently raised.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to board member discussion. Anybody have any words of wisdom to share with the board members? Now is your time. My only comment is I really am anxiously awaiting the day when we can meet in person. So we seem to be used to the Teams and Zoom and everything, but it's still not the same.
And we still have hiccups.
And well, that's true.
Inevitably, there's something that comes out.
Yeah. Well, Chair Wynn, it's important to note that the current legislation that allows us to meet virtually ends at the end of this month. And as of right now, there hasn't been an extension. There was language introduced last week, but as of today, it hasn't been approved yet. So, we may need to, I think it's at least here in the city, we're planning for April in case that legislation isn't extended. So we might want to be doing that with this body as well.
Yeah, Tim and I spoke about it. There's definitely, at least under the current conditions, we would have space for us to meet and, definitely be 6 feet apart and be able to safely meet if that's the case. So we'll watch that as well to see if it passes or not.
Yeah, thanks for that. We're continuing to monitor and kind of identified some places that we could go. We don't think we'd have enough space here to accommodate everyone safely, so we're kind of scanning the landscape. But yeah, it's obviously going to impact how we meet, and the end of March is not too far away.
Right. Remember, Eddie, did you have a comment or no? Or question?
I was going to make a comment. Just wanted to highlight and wish everyone a happy Women's History Month. And on that note, highlighting a local business, and I'm sure she's not on this call, but Shannon Cohen, as a African-American female business owner, being in Target nationwide. So that's a big deal, not only for this month, but but in general. And then coming off of Black History Month, we have several dynamic Black-owned businesses. Some are downtown, some are not, that have placements in stores like Mosby's Popcorn, which, the DDA, helped them with some of their business needs early on. And they're at Meyer and Bridge Street Markets, Daddy's Dough Marcus, Rice, Daddy's Dough Cookies, and also have placement. So that's 3. There's also 514, a candles that has placement at some of the Bridge Street Market and Meyer stores. And then also, for my brand, Malamaya Juice Bar, we have Malamazing juice that's been a 4-year project that is now distributed in 6 locations throughout Grand Rapids, including starting Saturday, Rick, at the JW Marriott and the restaurant. And so I wanted to really put that out there, because we are all doing our best to keep our businesses open, even if we have to change the trajectory of where we were going to go to a different place due to COVID. So keep your all eyes open, and we thank you all for the support at every level within our city, from the city government office to this organization, DGRI, and so many others that have been instrumental in keeping these businesses going. And so with that being said, I'm also grateful for the support of the DDA and DGRI in the city during the pandemic of really getting the social zones out there, the city getting money out there, and just all of that. The ambassadors have been doing a dynamic job when it comes to taking care of sidewalks and helping. I've witnessed many of them helping individuals in wheelchairs kind of make it up that sidewalk, kind of like the ramp when there's snow covering it, and taking care of shoveling by the meters. And so there's just so much, I think, to be proud of from our downtown perspective. And I see some of this stuff kind of making its way outside of downtown. So I'm excited to see some of these services and some of these other things grow a little further out throughout our city.
Thanks, Jamel, for the shout out as well. It's just another great reason to stay at the JW, right?
That's right.
All right. Anybody else? Anything? If not, I'd like to commend the executive director and the chair for getting this meeting 7 minutes early.
7 minutes. We did it.
7 minutes we saved. So all I can say is you're welcome and have a great day. All right. See you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.